Okay, we'll move to item 6, Gloucester Street Enliven Places Project, Traditional, Streetscape, Amenity and Pedestrian Improvements. Thank you very much. I'll allow you to introduce the...
Sure.
Actually, I think Pauline was going to introduce the report as it went through the ITE committee first.
Was I? I'm just finding it now because if you push the wrong button, everything collapses. Yeah. So yeah, this did come through ITE in June this year, and I'm kind of regretting that we didn't just pass it then, because what we did was we actually agreed with the concept and the design and the principles that was going to address safety and slow traffic and create a pleasant, fun environment and a good connection between Victoria Square and New Regent Street. But there was a suggestion that we would like a bit more fun sort of feature in there, which is why staff have gone away, and it looks like they've worked hard on that and come back with this option of the pukeko. But consequently, I see that the budget has increased for it, the costs have increased. But as I said, the committee did approve this in principle, but they requested an addition of some other fun factor in there. So that's where we got to, and that's why it's come back here today with the addition. So I think that's a bit of an overview of where we got to. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to... Yes, that's fine.
Introduce myself, I'm Carolyn Bonnis, I'm team leader of the Urban Regeneration team, and with me is Katie Smith, who manages the Enliven Places program. This is an Enliven Places project, and Stefan, because this is a joint report that was put up through ITE committee, in addition to the commentary around the additional fun feature, there was also some discussion around potentially changing the location of one of the crossings so as to avoid people crossing in between two mobility parking spaces. And so some further engineering work and advice was taken, and that has resulted in attachment C to the report, which covers both of those elements of the proposal. If you're looking at a range of options for where to go to from here, then you're possibly looking at either the full component of the full design with the fun feature that was requested. You could potentially run with the option that doesn't include the fun feature. You could pull right back to it not being an Enliven Places project and potentially adding some additional bike stands, or of course there's the do nothing option. Katie, who's managing the program, might have a couple of additional points to make as well.
As Pauline, Councillor Cotter pointed out, this is about improving the wayfinding and amenity of the pedestrian environment. It's about providing informal crossing points, because at the moment the only formal crossing places are at the corners with Manchester and Colombo streets. Many people cross informally along this street, and as I said, making those connections between the Performing Arts Precinct, Turanga, Victoria Square, etc. Gloucester Street recently underwent some resurfacing works, and all the white lines were repainted. There's no further planned works in the foreseeable future. The Enliven Places project will seek to provide these transitional streetscape amenity improvements for the next few years. We're also looking at increasing parking facilities. There were 3 cycle stands there prior to this. We're going to hopefully replace that with a corral of 6 cycle stands. The project will not result in a net loss of any car parking spaces. And as mentioned, the Infrastructure and Transport Environment Committee requested that this unique feature, fun feature, be added, which we've done in-house to reduce or keep the costs low.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Just a couple of small things. In 2.3, it says the project is expected to be in place for approximately 5 years ahead of permanent street renewal works. But then in 4.4, it says that there's permanent streetscape and design works are not programmed in the LTP, which is 10 years. I'm just wondering which it is.
So I think at the time that we wrote the original report, there was planned in the LTP, but then
Okay.
it's since changed.
Okay. And the bike stands, so the current plan has sort of a corral permanently in the road space of 6, is that right?
Permanent, again, all
It's
of
a
the
temporary
Enliven Places projects are temporary.
But what happened to the old bike stands that were there?
So when the road had the resurfacing done, those were taken out. At that particular point, there was you may remember there was a painted surface.
Yeah.
So that was taken out, and they were taken out at that point because we wanted to increase the numbers and put in something that was a bit more interesting.
Okay, no, that's cool. And the resolution up there talks about, as outlined in attachment A, but it would be attachment C now, wouldn't it? That if we went ahead with that.
That's
okay,
right.
thanks. Yeah, I know.
Thanks, Mike. Apologies I didn't ask this before the meeting, I normally would have, but that being said, just for a bit of clarity for me around the financial implication, the cost to implement on page 15 of the report states 40,000, and then the itemised cost estimates on page 21, excluding any mention of the Pacheco sculptures, state 60,000. So I'm just wondering which one it is.
So it is the higher amount now. When we start our projects, we usually put a sum aside, but you may appreciate that each of these elements are bespoke, and we can get some indicative pricing, but we've also had the safety report and we've had to change the design. So before we were looking at doing almost 4 that were the same, but they've all had to change. So with that specialisation and addition of safety items, the costs have gone up.
Brilliant, all good. And just one final other one. Is there any reason why you didn't include the cost as part of the resolution? And if there is no real reason why, could you do that in future? Because it's quite important.
For the red, oh, it's right.
Kind of
okay.
any report, to be fair.
Yes, it's part of the report.
Unless there was a reason why it wasn't, but if not, that would be nice. What's that?
Don't know if we can-
Then why is it at council if it's delegated?
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this program would normally have staff delegation, but because it has a transport
transport element,
component,
isn't it? Yeah.
it has to come through to the committee.
That's right.
But if you could just have the financial implication of the cost in the resolution, that would be good.
Thank you. Yes, mine was a question about the funding too. So just for clarification, it's 60,000 without the Pacheco. Yeah.
That's right.
And do you know when the court theatre work may be due to start? And would that have an impact on this transitional work?
So the dates of I'm not 100% sure on the dates of when the court theatre would start, but as far as I know, because these works and they can all be picked up and moved. That's part of a project. They're all transitional, so they can be picked up and moved elsewhere, but they wouldn't interfere with that. In fact, although there's going to be an alleyway or a laneway that goes through the Performing Arts precinct, and although we don't know exactly where that is, it will be somewhere in the vicinity of where the crossing opposite Turunga temporarily is, so it could align with that, or it could be moved in the future
so
to work with that.
even if the court theatre work started in the next year or 2 or 3, it wouldn't not affect this work. It's not going to impact on Gloucester Street like Turunga did, which is why we had to move the stuff previously.
I can't say whether or not the construction of the court theatre would come out onto the pavement. That's not. But if it were to, then we can pick these elements up and move them elsewhere, or we could, along Gloucester Street, or we could use them in other parts of the city.
Fantastic, because that was going to be my next question, so you've answered that. That's really good. And what was my third question was going to be? Can I come back to it? It's just wandered off.
Thank you. Pauline has just asked the question I was going to ask about the court theatre, because I think that is relevant. And I mean, it's not even how this project affects the court theatre development. It's more how the court theatre development affects this. because, you know, we're creating amenity. And if there's a major construction going on down there that reduces or possibly even destroys amenity, then, you know, that there is an element of why would you bother doing this if that was happening in the near future. I'd be quite keen to have an answer to the question that Pauline asked so that we can take that into consideration. And I don't know whether that's something that someone can find out. I'm guessing it would be reasonably easy while we're having this Q&A and debate.
So we are seeking expressive interest from architectural firms to do the concept designs. Construction's expected to start in February 2021.
So right in the middle of the period in which this would be here.
February.
Presumably that presumably that construction will involve noise and dust and delivery of materials and all the same things that touring are involved.
Undoubtedly, but as Katie said, until we've got any designs and we know what the construction program will look like, we don't know the extent of the impact out onto Gloucester Street. It might well be on Armour Street, it might be on Colombo Street, so that'll be something that needs to get figured out over the next year or so.
So now to my, so that was just a comment on Pauline's question really. Now to my real question. The cycle corral, 6 stands, $13,000. In the report, there's a picture of what looks like an enhanced cycle stand. Is that the 13,000 is for that enhanced cycle stand, not just the regular cycle stands like the ones that we've got on, for example, St Asaph Street?
Yes, it is, but it's going to be movable because it comes in a corral that can be put down onto the street. It also includes wheel stops and corner posts, which we need for safety-wise. It is enhanced, and it's part of, you know, the Enliven Places programme, bringing interest and life and vitality to the central city.
So what's the, just by comparison, what's the cost of just the normal steel ring or whatever they're made of, cycle stands, just the regular ones? If we went for a functionality rather than appearance approach, what would it cost?
I'm not sure. I don't have the information. Sorry, for what a standard cycle stand costs.
Presumably, this is more expensive.
Potentially.
I'm keen to know how much more expensive.
For the those other types of cycle corrals, they are around 8,000. I'm not sure how to describe those.
So they're like the ones, the temporary ones that have been put outside Riverside Markets, the yellow ones. So for that pick-up and that's $8,000, but in terms of our standard cycle sort of loop type, I just don't have the information, sorry.
But in terms of something temporary, what we've just heard then is that there is a cheaper alternative, which would be $8,000 rather than $13,000 with the same functionality. Thank you.
Similar functionality, a different look. And
Yep,
appearance.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, and thanks for the work and thanks for responding to, you know, our discussion at the committee. One of our members who we all know and love really wanted this fun aspect to be present, and you've responded to that, so thank you. If we didn't spend the money here, are we able to transfer the money to somewhere like Plymouth Lane or somewhere like that?
The Enliven Places budget is a capital budget that's available for this financial year, and we have a number of projects that we've either already committed to or that are upcoming. So yes, if this project doesn't go ahead, there is still the Enliven, that it would go back into the bucket of Enliven Places funding to do other Enliven Places projects. Okay. So if you had a particular one that you wanted to see, then we'd be interested to discuss that.
That's good to know. And I'm just a bit confused about how permanent this is. So you're talking about things that can be moved. So if we had this installed at Gloucester Street, what would stay if we wanted, you know, what's permanent and what moves?
So all of it can be moved. None of it is permanent. So the build-outs are designed so that they split into 3 sections, so they can be dismantled, picked up and put on a truck and used elsewhere. Again, there's the cycle corral at the moment. It is the 6 cycle stands are on a base. It's a lighter base than the ones that you've seen by Riverside, which is bolted to the surface, and then it has other elements for safety that are bolted to that. But again, they can all be picked up and moved and reused elsewhere.
Right, and so is there the possibility of it becoming permanent? So if people really like it and it works really well and achieves what we want it to achieve, can it stay there permanently?
Well, part of the Enliven Places programme is about trialling and testing, how spaces are used. And yes, if this actually slows traffic to be more aligned with the 30k speed limit of this area, it may be that in future years, if Gloucester Street is redesigned, it may have permanent build-outs which slow traffic, or it could become more of a shared space. But that would be a future permanent project.
Okay. And just finally, how much of the $60,000 without the Pukeko would be if the hard infrastructure is moved? How much would have been spent on the space that then wouldn't be able to be used again?
So I think I've got in my report. It's more about the installation costs, which are a few thousand. We've got some contingency, and then obviously the safety audit costs of 6,000. So you could probably say around 10,000 of that is those costs, and we'd have a decommissioning cost as well, which we have budget for any of our projects when we decommission them or move them elsewhere.
So potentially we could spend 10,000 on
Sorry,
this area.
and all that information is in
Yeah,
the report.
sorry,
We've got
I'm
lots
just
of questions to get
Thank
through.
you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Tim?
Thank you. Have you talked with the Isaac Theatre Royal,
Yes.
and what were their feedback?
So
I'm asking a question though. Thank you.
So back in June, we gave all the stakeholders a letter around the area. We hand-delivered that, and I was called by the Isaac Theatre Royal, and we just had a chat. Their main concern was that the seating build-out would interrupt their access to their, the backstage theatre area, and it won't do that. So they were happy with what we were proposing, but that was just a verbal conversation we had.
Thank you.
I was along the same lines too. Were they not concerned with the seating right outside on the footpath that was going to impact the spill
that
from the theatre?
The question was answered just before.
So right outside the Isaac Theatre at the moment, there is a sort of semi-permanent asphalted build-out. The proposed seating one is outside the cafe, which is on the corner of New Regent Street and Gloucester. So it's not outside the theatre at all.
Thank you.
The map's not quite right.
My question is around the seating as well. I was just wondering how you decided on the locations for it, because the one outside the Isaac Theatre Royal, for instance, is pretty much in shade all day, so I wouldn't want to sit there. So can you explain that?
Yes, well, we worked, transport, etc., about where were the best places to put these. There is a parking plan that was approved by the parking subcommittee back in April of this year, and therefore one of the aims was to ensure that we wouldn't result in a net loss of any parking. And the other thing is that yes, there are sunny spaces to sit, but also in the summer it's sometimes nice to have somewhere that's shaded as well. So we've got both a sunny place to sit and a shaded place.
Okay.
Thanks. When it comes to the bike parks, I know there were 3 stands removed. You're planning on putting 6 stands back, which would hold 12 bikes. Is that right? That's good because the Theatre Royal have been asking for more bike stands.
They have, yes.
The ones that we've done for Riverside, if we were to use the same design as that, which is cheaper and much sturdier and things, they've actually only got 3 stands in the middle, haven't they? Even though they take up a full car parking space.
I haven't actually.
So they don't actually have 6.
They've got 3 stands in the middle, but you can actually use the ends as well.
Yeah, so you'd put 8. One on the inside. You wouldn't want to put them on the outside because they'd be on the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah, my question is, have you considered putting the cycle stand, the corral thingy, in New Regent Street to leave that entrance, that car park thing out in front, or that lay-by thing out in front of the Theatre Royal? Because when the Theatre Royal is busy, it's not it's very busy. And I would like to see the wooden thing not there, and maybe the cycle stands just round the New Regent Street a bit to leave that bit of road open. Had you given any of that any thought?
So, as I originally, this was a Gloucester Street project. I know that the businesses in New Regent Street are looking for more cycle parking, and I believe that others within council are looking at some of the temporary ones that can be placed that people
The
mentioned
Riverside
before.
type ones.
The Riverside
Yeah,
ones,
yeah.
yes. The other thing is the position of these cycle stands is what's on the parking plan that was approved by the parking subcommittee back in April.
Thank you.
So this is a transitional streetscape. Does that mean that, and we've heard that a lot of the build-outs can be moved and repositioned around the city, does that mean that they're built for a life of 5 years and there wouldn't be much value after that of them, or we could potentially use all the build-outs which make up most of the cost after the transitional project ended?
So we do ask for items to have a minimum of 5 years. Many of our assets, especially now that we're knowing that the rebuild is going to take longer and we'll have empty spaces for longer, that we hope that they have a 5 to 10 year lifespan. If you look at some of the items that we've got out, we call them the Ricky planters. They're the big seated planters out in the street. They've already been out there for 5 years and they've got plenty more of life in them because of the way that they've been constructed with a metal frame and a wooden exterior. Some of the early transitional projects that you may remember, such as the planters that were made out of tyres and recycled wood, they wouldn't last that time. So yes, we are looking at far more quality products now. No. We also have, if I might say, a gifting process now, so that when we no longer need items within the programme and we can't use them anymore, we are able to gift those on to either our partners, our placemaking partners, or other community organisations.
Sam?
Yeah, thank you. 2 questions. The first one is around, and I mean I have to say this budget or staff delegated budget is sort of new to me, so I'm just wondering, there's 510,000 in it. This would be a large part of that. What would be left for the balance of the year?
So
if we proceeded with this $80,000 cost today, what would you have left for until June next year?
450.
So you haven't spent anything else?
Oh, sorry. There's a whole programme of works that are underway. That projects have already started, and then there are others that are being planned. So we've already committed. You may have seen that we've done the recent competition for the summer street flags. So that project was about 30,000. So in beginning of January, the street flags will be up in the street, and they were part of a competition to get people to design those. So there's a whole raft of projects within the programme.
So yes, maybe I'm not being clear. What have we committed to already under staff delegation from this budget?
The current level is?
It's you'd probably say about 200,000 of that at least.
Okay, and the second one was, and I have to say the financial implications to me were quite light in terms of the reporting. But what will it have cost to put the report together in terms of staff time and these designs or these concepts? Do we know? Normally that is sort of factored in.
Yeah, so we haven't previously factored in staff time of report writing as a factor in the financial reporting. We've been reporting on our operational and capital budget.
So I guess when it comes though to options, we either proceed with it or do nothing. There's no financial implication for the time that's spent putting the report together.
So we've obviously invested some time in getting to this point already, which if there was a do nothing to take forward, that time would be a
do we know what
sunk
that's
cost.
quantified at? Because normally we do have that.
Yeah, with all due respect, I think staff did try to answer it. We don't quantify the staff time that goes in. If that's something that council want, we could look at that, but it's not easy to across the 3 staff sitting there, and we don't do a time and motion type approach for individual council reports. That would cost in and of itself, but undoubtedly there's been a staff cost, and that's a sunk cost. Even
coming through community board though, we have when you decline something, there's a cost of doing that, and it says the cost of report was X amount.
We don't do that for council reports. I'm not familiar that we do that for community board ones, but there's a sunk cost, and the longer this goes on and the more report back, the greater that sunk cost is.
Yeah. Sam, I think you've raised a point, but I think it's not for this item. We need to take that offline. Jimmy?
Not sure this temporary project should be under the part of the annual plan. Am I right? Those budget should be under.
Jimmy, this is this financial year. There's always the
budget.
This
financial.
So,
okay, if that's true, you particularly mentioned this project actually is in response to the community request. Also, regarding the consultation, you already have a consultation with Isaac Theatre already. So, but you here mentioned have further consultation. Who else? It's affected along whole kind of Gloucester Street, all those the kind of stakeholders.
Right. So originally we sent out just a stakeholder letter back in June, and then recently, when this has been put back on the agenda, we have sent the same people. We've handed out a letter to them, and that's all the businesses along Gloucester Street and all the businesses up New Regent Street.
Okay. Thank you.
We've got 3 minutes left. Hopefully Andrew's going to be the last person to ask a question, and then we can put forward, is it going to actually add value to this discussion? Because we've gone around in circles, and I don't think we've actually progressed.
The question that I'd like to ask will...
No, we've got 20 minutes.
The question I'm about to ask probably would influence what I'd like to move, depending on the answer to the question, if I can. New Regent Street. The opportunity to put a cycle stand similar to the one or same as the one outside the Riverside Market on New Regent Street. If we passed a resolution now today approving that you do that, could you go ahead and do it, or would there be further steps that would need to occur first?
Mike just advised me that most of the land most of the road space down New Regent Street has been leased for table and chairs. And then obviously you've also got the tram corridor that runs through there as well, which needs a clear zone. So just off the top of my head, it might be difficult to find a location within there to site some...
So if we approved the cycle stand like the one that's outside Riverside Market to go in the same place where the cycle stand is shown in the report that's in front of us, you can do that without any further reference. You can just go ahead and do it.
Correct.
All right, great.
Jump in, and I'm going to move something, which I think is very similar to what you want. Could you put my... So the cycle stand that's going to be going in there will be the same cycle stand that is outside the Riverside Market? So this is and it's going to be going exactly where the cycle stand is planned in the attachment A or C, which is... You can foreshadow a motion.
A motion, then, whatever.
Yes. It's $8,000. It's already on budget. It's on budget. We've done it before.
The maintenance cost, right?
Okay. Is there any debate?
As outlined in attachment C, minus the Pukeko and with the inclusion of the Riverside style cycle parks.
Through Mr. Chair, may I just ask that you also just, would you be able to, because I'd probably support that, if you can just say what the financial impact is in the resolution?
At a cost of 60,000.
Yeah.
He's happy to do that.
I just want clarity on that.
Need a seconder for that?
We can the mayor's already seconded my one. We can debate this one, and if it doesn't fail, then we can see if there's a seconder for. That's not a problem. So is there any debate, Yanni?
I just want to get clarity, because in the budget that we've got, there's things like installation costs, contingency, safety audit,
including review post changes, which come up to more than the cost of putting the cycleway thing in. Can we just be really clear in the resolution? Because I think Jamie's point was really good, specifying how much we're approving in terms of the budget, so we're clear. So you've said 8,000. Is that's
okay? This is
point of order. I don't think that's our
this
delegation.
Yeah.
We've already delegated the funding for this to staff to decide on the funding and given them the budget to do it.
I can't.
So we don't
can't.
need to
Sorry,
approve it.
I'm just Yanni, we're in debate. So it needs to be a debate, no questions.
All right. So how can this is like goes to the heart of transparency of this council. We don't even know how much we're approving in terms of number 2. I think number 2 is quite reasonable in terms of putting some cycle parking in. But we should be specific when we make resolutions so that our community can see, with public money, how much we're paying. And when you look at the budget that we've got for this project, and we've had an amendment come in that we've just seen now, no ability to get questions answered around having the total cost of it, but just like a figure that's chucked out of 8,000, I think it's really important we know what that 8,000 includes and what other costs we may be having. But I'm not going to support something that might have a safety audit that costs $6,000 and an installation of $1,500 and a contingency of $2,000. If that's greater than, the cost of putting in the cycleway, the cycle park, it just makes no sense at all. So I don't think it's fair that we can't get clarity around that, especially when being asked to vote on something. So I won't be supporting this. I think we do need to be transparent with how we're spending money, and this resolution does not do that.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yanni's comments kind of influence what I'm going to say, actually, because it would be good to know what the cost is, given those other additional costs that have just been referred to. In principle, I'm supportive of putting the cycle stand there. I think that's great. But in the absence of those other numbers, I'll be supporting paragraph 1 and be voting against paragraph 2.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the recommendation. I think that there needs to be a wee bit more work in this area because there are issues when it is busy. So I do think that it's been identified by the key parties in this area, Isaac Theatre Royal, etc., that a bike parking is as a need in this area. There is plenty of seating with regards to the area in the sun on New Regent Street. I think putting seating on the shady side of a Christchurch street is questionable, and I do think there's a wee bit more work needed to do here. So I will be supporting the recommendation put up by the Chairman. Cheers.
Thank you. No, I will not be supporting the recommendation. I request that you put them separately as well, because I think this Enliven Places project is really good, and I think it's going to make a huge difference to Gloucester Street if we would allow it to go forward. We do have money sunk into this already. We know that through design. Gloucester Street is a lovely street, and this will enable us to enjoy it even more. And I think with the plantings and the seating and the cycle stands there, I think it's going to really enhance this area. So I really implore you to support my foreshadowed motion if this fails, and let's liven up Gloucester Street.
Thank you. For me, one of the key things is getting the cycle parking back and getting a bit more of it. And we do already have money set aside in another budget that has been used to build the ones for Riverside Market. And that budget was approved by council in the previous term, and we asked staff to go and build those for us. So I think that using those Riverside ones that are already budgeted for, including the other costs, I think makes sense. We have been really transparent through our annual and long-term planning process. We have allocated this budget already to the Enliven Spaces program, and we delegated the decision-making over that to staff. If we want to change that in the middle of a meeting, then I don't think that's fair on the staff who have actually fulfilled their role exactly as we've asked them to. I'm happy to support the motion to get the cycle parking back. The budget's already there. Whenever we've got all of those things, the Riverside ones in or the similar ones into other places, all of that is already covered, and we have already allocated the budget for it. So I'd urge people to approve that. It looks like that there are potentially around the table people going to vote against this for two different reasons. Some because they potentially want more, and some because they don't want anything at all. And the risk is that those who want more end up with nothing, and the risk is that those who want nothing at all end up with everything. So what I do urge people to do is to vote for this one, which is a bit of a compromise. It gets something back, stuff that's already budgeted, and does it in a timely way to support both the new Regent Street businesses with the additional cycle parking, which currently gets all chained up to tables and chairs and lampposts and things down New Regent Street, and to support the Isaac Theatre Royal, which has been asking for bike parking back for quite some time now.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I just wonder then if, just in light of what Sarah said, if perhaps Pauline's foreshadowed motion is actually an amendment, and it might make more sense to put that, and then you would then come back to.
No, it's not. It's the opposite of what the motion is.
Even with number with two,
it's the opposite.
I thought one's the opposite, two isn't.
Further to what Jamie's just saying, I want to support the original recommendation, number one, but I want the cheaper bike stands, so there doesn't seem to be that option there. So how do we amend one?
It would be if Pauline's was put an amendment.
Sorry.
Is that foreshadowed one? Yeah. Right, okay. I would like to support the foreshadowed, Pauline's foreshadowed.
Thanks. James?
Actually, Councillor Templeton described it well, actually, the everything or nothing aspect of it. And that makes it difficult with this two-part to it. But my question is, what happens to if one is passed, what happens to the temporary pedestrian amenity improvement project on Gloucester Street? What happens to it?
Question, but it won't happen
at all.
Yep.
So look, I'm supporting, obviously since I seconded the recommendation that's been put up by the chair, and in a way I do so with regret because as Councillor Cotter has said, the staff have done precisely what they've been asked to do, and others have said that as well. So and I want to acknowledge the staff because that is exactly what was requested of them. I think, though, that what has happened since the time that this was considered by the Infrastructure and Transport Environment Committee is that we've had a change of focus with the new council. And we have asked that all aspects of the council's budgeting and what it's expending money on is actually revisited on a really in-depth basis so that we can understand whether we should be prioritising some things over other things. The Enliven Places program was established at a time where gap filler and all of those other community groups had basically transpired, and they had developed, they had emerged into an environment which encouraged the temporary activation. This is a large expenditure of money although temporary activation for a significant period of time. And I'm not necessarily persuaded that we need to be trying to achieve two objectives in the Enliven Places space. So I'd like to take some time to consider that. I do agree that we've got to get the temporary bike parking in there. I would recommend that people look at New Regent Street. I know that there are challenges with New Regent Street, but there are also potential opportunities closer to the corner of Gloucester Street with New Regent Street where they join. And the imagery doesn't quite stack with the picture of Gloucester Street and the location of the Theatre Royal. I worry about cars not being able to get out of that car park, which is a mobility park, and that space is a dropping off space immediately behind it. So You know, they're constantly, cars are dropping off people. When it's really, really busy and it's all lined up with a red carpet, it's a really challenging area to be putting something like that in. So I'm supporting the Chair's recommendation.
What I would have liked to have seen is something in between what Pauline suggested and what Mike has suggested, because I am not convinced about the seating, but I do think the crossing points are quite important. I cross across there a lot. I tend to jaywalk along there, but it's quite dangerous to be crossing because you've got to go between cars to come out most locations. So it's sort of, I think those crossing points should be something we should be considering. So I won't support this recommendation, even though I definitely want bike parking in.
There are likely to be significant additional costs than the 8,000 to implement 2. In which case I'm comfortable with 2.
Thank you. Can I ask a question of you, Mr. Chair? I don't mean to be a nuisance, but it's just around how this could potentially pass. How could you put
okay,
one and two separately
I'll explain it in my debate.
if there's a foreshadowed motion?
I'll explain it in my debate. I think this is why we're going to have committees of the whole instead of recommendations coming up from, you know, quite substantial committees, because it does get relitigated, which is a shame, and obviously staff have gone to a lot of work to get to this point. I mean, I don't think that's fair on staff, especially when it comes from a recommendation from a committee, but this is a new council. There's new faces on this council, and it's clear from what I've seen there's a new direction that we are heading, and we've heard from the ratepayers loud and clearly why that is. My recommendation is not to approve the proposed Enliven Places temporary pedestrian amenity area. So that basically means that project does not advance. The second part of that, and they will be put separately, is actually to install one of the temporary bike parking platforms that we have currently at Riverside Market. That is on budget. We've gone through that decision-making process last term, and they are ready to go close to it, so there's no extra cost to there. What I urge councillors to do is, if they actually want the project to go ahead, which we're debating, then say no to my recommendation. But if my one passes and it doesn't proceed, then say yes to the cycle parking if you want to see cycle parking there, because you have that opportunity to actually get something out of it, even if you don't get the whole project. Yeah, I'll be putting both mine, 1 and 2, and then we'll see what happens from that.
Thanks, Mike.
Would we still go to the foreshadowed?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We could do 1 and then 1 and then 2.
If needs be, we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to put. Make sure we get it right. 1 does not approve the project. All those in favour? Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, we'll get a division on that. Yeah. Yes for no.
Yes or no. Just to keep things really simple. So no for Pauline's.
So just so we're very clear, a yes is we do not approve this project. Okay.
Yes. Councillor McClellan? Yes. Councillor McDonald? Yes. Councillor Davidson?
Yes.
Councillor Galloway? No. Councillor Scandrett?
Yes.
Councillor Coker? No. Councillor Cotter? No. Councillor Chen?
Yes.
The Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Templeton?
Yes.
Councillor Major?
Yes.
Councillor Turner?
Yes.
Councillor Johansson?
Yes.
Councillor Daniels?
No.
Councillor Goff?
No.
11 in favour and 5
Yeah.
against.
That's,
I was against.
Yeah.
No.
no, you're, okay. Okay. Happy? All right, that's carried 11-5. Yeah, and item 2, the temporary installation of the bike stand. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And Yanni abstained. And abstains. All right. That must be it.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll close the meeting with a karakia from Councillor Templeton.
Unohia ki te uru tapu nui o te tānei, kia wātea, kia mama, te nakau, te tinana, te wairua i te awa takata, koe rā o rongo whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, homie, huie, tai ki e.
Kia ora.